By day 3 of a real blackout, you can usually tell who prepared for reality and who prepared for vibes. Not because one family has a bunker and the other doesn't. Not because one spent more money. You see it in the little things. One household is tired but steady. They've got warm food. They've got light that isn't burning through their last batteries. They've got a routine. The other household is unraveling. They're cold, frustrated, and making desperate trades that don't make sense. Because they didn't actually build a plan. They built a pile. That gap is what people miss when they talk about preparedness, like it's a shopping contest. There's a principle that explains it really cleanly. It's the 80-20 rule, the idea that a small portion of inputs drives most outcomes. In survival, it's almost rude how true it is. About 20% of your preps decide about 80% of how you'll do when things get rough. If that core is solid, you can be missing a lot of extras and still be okay. If that core is weak, you can have shelves of gear and still end up stuck. And I'm not saying that as some tough guy flex. I'm saying it because it's actually good news. It means you don't need to prepare for every scenario or buy every gadget. You need to stop wasting energy on the wrong stuff and lock in the fundamentals that keep showing up in real emergencies. Here's the trap a lot of people fall into. They confuse buying with preparing. Buying feels productive, planning feels boring, skills feel slow, testing your setup feels annoying. So people keep buying because it gives them that quick hit of, I'm doing something. But when the lights are out and the systems are down, nobody gets saved by a cool-looking product they never practiced with. You get saved by the basics you covered early, the habits you built, and the calm decisions you're still able to make when everyone else is getting pulled around by panic. So if I had to boil down preparedness into the few things that actually matter most, it would look like this. First, water. Always water. People love to talk about food storage, but water is the part that turns into a problem fast. Not just we're thirsty, fast. We're making bad decisions because our bodies and brains aren't functioning fast. A serious water plan isn't complicated, it's 3 layers. You store some. Enough to cover the early days when everything is chaotic and you don't want to be out scouting and hauling if you can avoid it. You know where you'd source more. Real locations near you, not a vague idea. Rain catchment, a creek, a lake, a well. Even the water sitting in your home systems that people forget about. And you can purify it in more than one way. A mechanical filter is huge because it doesn't rely on power. Boiling works if you can cook. Chemical treatment can be a backup. The point isn't picking one perfect method. The point is not having your whole plan collapse because one method fails. And I'm going to say something that sounds boring but saves people. You should practice once. Take real water, filter it, clean the setup, store it properly. Because the first time you discover what's confusing about your filter should not be when you're stressed, cold, and trying to keep kids calm. Second, heat and cooking. A lot of people stock food that assumes normal life continues. Just add water. Just microwave. Just toss it in the oven. Then the power's out, and suddenly their pantry is half useless. You don't need gourmet options. You need a way to boil water and cook simple calories safely. A small stove with fuel you can store, a way to light it reliably, and cookware that can handle real use. And it has to be safe. I'm repeating that on purpose. Fire indoors can go bad fast. Carbon monoxide is silent. House fires don't care that you meant well. If you're using any combustion appliance inside, ventilation matters, placement matters, and you need to treat it like the threat it can become if you get sloppy. The steady family in a blackout isn't living large. They're eating warm food and drinking safe water, and that alone changes everything. Warm calories reduce stress. Hot water keeps morale up. People sleep better. Better sleep means better decisions. Third, light. This sounds minor until you've lived through deep darkness. Darkness changes your brain. It shrinks your world. It makes simple tasks hard. It makes every noise feel louder, and every shadow feel like a problem. The goal isn't to light up the whole house like normal. That's how you burn through supplies. The goal is targeted light. Headlamps so your hands are free. A lantern for a central area. Batteries you can manage. Rechargeables if you have a recharging plan. And if you're planning for longer outages, you want your lighting to be something you can sustain, not something you burn through in a weekend. Fourth, medical basics. This is the part people avoid because it's uncomfortable. They'd rather buy another tool than think about a burn, a deep cut, or an infection when urgent care isn't an option. In a disruption, small injuries become big problems because normal systems aren't there to catch you. A cut that would be annoying on a normal Tuesday becomes a serious issue when you can't easily get supplies or antibiotics. So the 80-20 approach here is know how to stop bleeding, treat burns, clean and protect wounds, and handle common issues without improvising blindly. Have supplies, yes, but also have knowledge. Printed guides help. A basic course helps more. You don't need to be a medic. You need to not be helpless. Fifth, mindset. This is the one people think they have until they don't. A lot of mental collapse doesn't look dramatic. It looks like delay. It looks like denial. It looks like people waiting for permission to act. Because in normal life, someone always tells you what to do next. An alert, a text, a news update, a siren, an official statement. When that goes quiet, your brain tries to fill the gap with assumptions. And if you haven't trained for that, fear takes the wheel, or you freeze, or you chase comfort decisions instead of smart ones. The useful mindset isn't blind optimism. It's emotional control and adaptability. It's being able to say, okay, this is the new reality for now. What's the next right move? Even if it's small, even if it's annoying, even if you don't feel ready. Structure helps. A routine helps. Simple roles help. Who's handling water? Who's handling cooking? Who's handling security and checks? When people have roles, fear has less room to spread. Sixth, planning that's actually usable. Most people either plan for everything and get overwhelmed, or plan for one specific scenario and get surprised by something else. Both are shaky. A strong plan focuses on capabilities, not fantasies. It asks practical questions. If you have to leave in 10 minutes, what do you grab? If you have to stay for 10 days, what do you use first and what do you protect? If roads are blocked, what routes do you use? If phones don't work, how do you communicate? If the water stops, what's your next step? A plan like that can fit on one page. It doesn't need binders, it needs clarity, and it needs at least one test run, because a plan you've never walked through is basically a story. Seventh, community, not a crowd, a small circle. The lone wolf idea sounds cool until you're trying to stay alert with no sleep. Until you're sick, until you twist an ankle, until you need to go get water and you're leaving your home empty. A small, trusted circle buys you a huge advantage. 2 or 3 people you can rely on, who stay calm, who contribute, who share values. That's the kind of group that actually works. And this isn't about broadcasting your supplies or inviting chaos. It's about building real relationships before you need them. Quiet conversations, small exchanges, basic mutual support. It's knowing who's solid and who's unpredictable. In real disasters, the people who do best often aren't the ones with the fanciest gear. They're the ones who can coordinate and share load without spiraling into drama. Eighth, skills, the kind that don't care about batteries. Gear breaks, fuel runs out, systems fail, skills stay. If you can make fire in bad conditions, you can create heat, cook, purify water, and keep morale from collapsing. If you can navigate without GPS, you can move with purpose instead of wandering. If you can read a situation, you can avoid danger instead of walking into it. If you can fix basic problems with hand tools, you're not stuck begging for a system that isn't answering. Skills also have a quiet psychological benefit. Competence reduces fear. When you know you can handle the basics, the world feels less like it's closing in. Now, gear still matters, but only the gear that supports the foundation. That's where the 80-20 rule becomes almost insulting. Most survival gear is just entertainment. It looks cool, it feels good to own. It's also dead weight if it doesn't support water, heat, light, medical stability, communication, navigation, and repair. A small set of reliable tools beats a closet full of novelty items every time. And if you're worried about electronics being vulnerable, then protecting a few critical items becomes part of the plan. A properly insulated metal container or Faraday pouch can keep small essentials safer. Not everything needs shielding, but a radio, a small charging setup, and a couple of key devices can be worth keeping alive. Here's the real payoff of thinking this way. When you focus on the core 20%, you stop feeling like you're chasing an endless list. You stop getting distracted by products that promise confidence. You build a system that works when you're tired, stressed, cold, and irritated, which is exactly when weak plans fail. That's how two families can face the same blackout and have completely different lives by day 3. One family is eating warm food, drinking safe water, sleeping in shifts, and keeping a routine. They're not comfortable, but they're stable. That stability keeps their decisions sharp. The other family has a bunch of stuff and no structure. They burn fuel too fast. They waste light. They realize they can't cook what they stored. They're sleep deprived. They start making desperation moves. And desperation is where people get hurt. If you want an honest way to audit your preparedness, ask yourself a few questions without flinching. If the power went out tonight, what's your water plan by tomorrow morning? How are you cooking safely? How are you handling light at night without burning through everything? What's your 2-week food plan that doesn't depend on refrigeration? Who do you trust, and what's the plan if phones don't work? What skills are you assuming you have that you haven't practiced? If those answers are clear, you're ahead. If those answers are fuzzy, it doesn't mean you're doomed. It just means you found your real work. Cut the noise. Build the foundation. And sooner or later, if things stay bad long enough, there's a moment almost nobody plans for. Someone knocks on your door, not with a weapon, not with a threat, just a person, tired, cold, scared, and asking for help. That decision, who you let in, what you give, what you refuse, and how you handle it without making an enemy, is where a lot of great plans suddenly get tested for real. If you found this advice useful, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below sharing your own experiences or thoughts on preparedness. Let's build that community together.